Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. In the mood for a little deep dive with us into the world of relationships.
Always.
Today, we are looking at, well, it started as a Reddit post
Okay.
on the Ask Men advice subreddit.
Oh, interesting.
So this user, TakenY4, posts this question. Would you sleep with a married woman?
Just like that, straight out, no lead up.
Just boom, drops that bomb.
Wow.
And the responses are unbelievable. I mean, hundreds of comments. Clearly struck a nerve. It's amazing how one simple question, right,
Yeah.
can just unleash so many different opinions and anxieties about infidelity, morality, risk, the whole nine yards.
Right.
So that's what we're going to be diving into today. This treasure trove of perspectives.
All right.
See what we can uncover, and maybe even learn a little something about ourselves along the way.
Sounds good.
So I got to start with some of the more humorous responses.
Okay. Love it.
Because when a topic kind of makes you squirm a little bit,
Yeah.
people often turn to humor. So there's this one comment. The username was literally Fatherbacks.
No way.
Cracks a joke about, well, after he puts the kids to bed, he's got some free time maybe.
Oh my goodness.
And then there was another one that this guy's like, I mean, I would prefer not to, but the wife insists.
Yeah, playing the victim there a little bit.
Right, classic deflection.
Classic deflection.
But it makes you think though, right?
It does, yeah.
Like even in chess, there's this underlying tension, would you say?
Definitely.
Like this question is more loaded than it first appears.
Oh yeah, way more loaded. And I think, humor can be a way to kind of address that
Yeah,
without maybe fully confronting it head on.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there's this whole other thread running through a lot of the responses, and it's kind of dark, to be honest. It's
Oh.
fear.
Mm-hmm.
There's fear.
Mm.
Like straight up fear of the consequences. You get comments like, nope, no nut bust is worth a bullet to the head or a car to the knees.
Wow. So we're really hitting a nerve here.
Another guy's like, that's how my grandpa went, and I'd do the same probably. It's been a stressful enough life.
That's a little intense.
Right. And then there's this one. Okay, you ready for this? How do you feel about the husband bursting into the hotel room and blowing his brains out all over the both of you?
Oh my goodness.
Like, wow.
So we've gone from humorous deflection to graphic violence.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because it reveals this whole societal anxiety
Yeah.
around infidelity, possessiveness, violence even.
Right.
Particularly, it seems, male anxiety.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you think about it. Historically, men have been, very possessive
Sure.
of their quote-unquote property, which unfortunately sometimes includes their wives.
Yeah. And so the question becomes, are these fears realistic or just totally blown out of proportion?
Right. Is this just kind of a cultural myth we perpetuate?
Yeah. Or is there some legitimate danger?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a mix, right? Like, I'm sure there are cases where things have turned violent, but I'm also sure it's not as common as some of these comments might lead you to believe.
Right.
It's interesting, though, how these fears shape our perceptions and our behaviors.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you think twice, right?
Definitely.
About getting involved in a situation like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so moving on. There's also a really strong moral argument
Okay.
coming from a lot of these guys. The whole bro code thing.
Mm-hmm.
You get comments like, fuck no, cheaters are scum, and anyone that encourages such behavior is scum. The thought of violating the supposed sanctity of marriage makes my skin crawl.
Wow.
And then there's this guy who's like, don't fuck another man's wife or girlfriend, no matter what her story to you is, or you are liable to end up with the Undertaker. At any point.
So there's definitely a sense of, like, righteous indignation in
Right.
a lot of these responses.
Right, like how dare you even ask this question?
Yeah, like, it's not even a question that should be considered.
Exactly. But here's the thing, the irony, right,
Yeah.
is that infidelity rates are through the roof.
Exactly. It's like if everyone's condemning it so vehemently, why is it still so common?
Right, it's like, is everyone just lying?
Yeah, it makes you wonder about the disconnect between what people say and what they actually do.
Big time.
And I think that's something we need to explore further.
Absolutely. So we've got humor, fear, moral outrage, and then, of course, you got your outliers,
Outliers. Okay, always love those.
right? Like the guy who's all about polyamory.
Interesting.
Open relationships, consent is key. And then there's another one, this guy's a swinger. So he sleeps with married women, but with their husband's consent.
Oh, wow.
Totally different ball game, right?
Totally different ballgame. So we're expanding the boundaries here.
Right. Like, where do you draw the line? When does it become okay? Or is it never okay?
Yeah, and I think that's a question for every individual to grapple with.
Absolutely. Oh, and I almost forgot this one. This comment kind of blew my mind. It said, amazing to read all these comments. So many paragons of virtue on Reddit, apparently.
Huh.
Amazing to me that more than half of marriages end in divorce, often because of cheating. And yet, nobody cheats or wants to sleep with a cheater. Kind of like nobody goes to strip clubs or watches porn, yet it's $1 trillion industry.
Right.
Somebody has to be doing it, LOL.
Yeah, he's calling out the hypocrisy,
Yeah.
which is so prevalent. I mean, societal norms often clash with individual behaviors.
For sure. And so the question becomes why? Why is there this disconnect?
Yeah, what are we so afraid to admit?
Right. What are we hiding? Or are we just fooling ourselves?
Or maybe a little bit of both.
Maybe so. All right. So we've covered a lot of ground here, but we're just getting started.
I'm intrigued. Where do we go from here?
Well, we've only just scratched the surface of these Reddit responses. So after a quick break, we're going to dive even deeper into this whole idea of risk. And then we'll explore some of the more, let's say, controversial perspectives that emerged. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome back.
All right, so we've talked about the humor, the fear, the moral outrage. But there's another layer to this whole would you sleep with a married woman question.
Another layer. Okay.
And it's risk.
Risk.
I mean, we've already touched on the fear of, a jealous husband
Right.
taking things into his own hands.
Right. The physical danger.
Right, but it goes beyond that, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. There's emotional risk too.
Oh, absolutely.
The potential for heartbreak, guilt, betrayal, not just for the people directly involved, but for, everyone in their orbit.
Right, the ripple effect.
Exactly. Infidelity can leave a trail of emotional wreckage.
And then there's the risk to your reputation.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
Getting labeled a homewrecker, that can have serious consequences, socially, professionally.
Absolutely, especially in certain communities or circles.
Right. And it's interesting how these responses kind of reflect different levels of risk aversion.
Risk aversion.
Some guys are like, absolutely not, too dangerous,
Right.
while others seem more willing to gamble.
To roll the dice, yeah.
So what do you think accounts for that difference?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors. Personality, age, past experiences, maybe even just how tempting the opportunity is.
Right, like, is she really, really attractive?
Yeah, I mean, attraction can definitely cloud judgment.
Yeah.
But I also think societal expectations play a role.
How so?
Well, men are often conditioned to be more risk-taking.
Right, that whole boys will be boys thing.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe that explains why some guys seem less fazed by the potential consequences.
Interesting. It would be fascinating to see how women would respond to this same question.
It would, wouldn't it?
Maybe we should do a follow-up deep dive on that.
I'm in.
All right, so we got risk aversion, and then there's this other thing that kind of jumped out at me.
Oh.
This sense of entitlement.
Entitlement?
Yeah, like some of these guys were basically saying, well, if a married woman is cheating, it's because her husband isn't meeting her needs.
Interesting. So they're shifting the blame, essentially.
Exactly, like it's the husband's fault.
Right, as if the woman has no agency in the situation.
Right, it's like, oh, he's unhappy, so she's entitled to seek attention elsewhere.
Yeah, and that completely ignores the women's own motivations and choices.
Right, and it kind of perpetuates that stereotype of men, always on the prowl, just waiting for a vulnerable woman to come along.
Absolutely. It's a very reductive and damaging view of both men and women.
So how do we even begin to address that?
Well, I think it starts with having open and honest conversations about relationships.
About expectations, boundaries.
Exactly. Couples need to be more upfront about what they want and need from each other and from their marriage.
And individuals need to take responsibility for their own actions.
Absolutely. Stop blaming others for your choices.
Right, it's a two-way street.
It is, and it requires a level of maturity and self-awareness that, honestly, not everyone has.
That's true. But it's something to strive for, isn't it?
It is, if we want to have healthy and fulfilling relationships.
Absolutely. So after all of this, what do you think are the key takeaways from this Reddit deep dive so far?
Well, for me, it's the realization that this question, would you sleep with a married woman, is way more complex than it might seem on the surface.
Yeah, it's not a simple yes or no answer.
It's not. It forces you to think about your own morals, your values, the risks you're willing to take, the consequences you're willing to face.
And it highlights the disconnect between what we say we believe and how we actually behave.
Right, the hypocrisy which is something we see in so many areas of life, not just relationships.
True. It's like we all have these ideals, these societal norms, but then real life comes along and throws us curveballs.
And sometimes we make choices that don't align with those ideals.
And that's okay, right? I mean, we're all human.
We are, and I think acknowledging that is important. It allows for more empathy, more understanding, and ultimately, more honest and authentic relationships.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up this deep dive, we want to remind our listeners about something exciting.
Yes, we'd love for you to continue this conversation with us.
If you're finding this whole exploration into the complexities of relationships fascinating, make sure you subscribe to Voices of the Soul so you don't miss any future deep dives.
And for even more thought-provoking content, head over to Shauna Polidge's YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button.
All right, now back to our deep dive. Any final thoughts to leave our listeners pondering? So, big question. What's the one thing, if anything, that you'd want our listeners to take away from this whole deep dive?
That's a good question. I think for me it would be the importance of self-reflection. You know, this isn't just about judging other people's choices.
Oh, interesting.
It's about, taking a look at our own beliefs and our own behaviors.
Yeah,
So, ask yourself, what are your boundaries when it comes to infidelity?
right.
What factors would sway your decision in a situation like this? And maybe even more importantly, why?
Yeah, get to that root, that core reason, right?
Right.
The why behind the belief.
Exactly. Is it based on personal values,
Mm,
religious teachings, societal expectations, or, something else entirely?
right.
Because, it's easy to get caught up in that black and white thinking.
Yeah,
Cheating is bad. End of story. But as we've seen, through this deep dive, it's so much more nuanced than that.
way more gray areas than we like to admit, I think.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think that's really a sign of maturity,
Yeah.
both individually
Yeah,
and as a society, to be able to acknowledge that complexity
right.
because it allows for greater empathy,
Mm.
understanding, and ultimately, more honest and fulfilling relationships.
Okay, that's a great point. So, listeners, we want to hear from you.
Yeah, definitely.
What are your thoughts
Right.
on this whole, would you sleep with a married woman thing?
Yeah, did any of the Reddit responses did they resonate with you?
Yeah.
Did they challenge your thinking? We'd love to hear from you.
Right. Share your thoughts in the comments. Keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
And of course, if you enjoyed this little deep dive into the complexities of, well, everything,
Human nature.
human
Oh,
nature,
right.
make sure to subscribe to Voices of the Soul
Yeah, don't miss out.
so you never miss another episode.
We've got more deep dives coming your way.
And for even more, thought-provoking content,
I like to think so.
check out Shauna Polidge's YouTube channel.
Yes, hit that subscribe button.
Hit that subscribe button.
Join the community.
And until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.